Some guys go into the combine with a lot of hype, and then the workouts happen and their stock plummets. And sometimes that's fair because that workout reality matches the film, and sometimes it isn't fair. And guys see their draft stock far too low, and it just further validates that way too much stock is put into the combine and how these guys run straight ahead 40s and look in their underpants. And then you have those other guys that, some get no attention, then they go tear up the combine, they get a lot of attention, and people go back and scramble to the film and see if they miss something. But then you have those other guys that are bigger name prospects, but really do themselves a lot of justice with the combine and end up making themselves quite a bit of money. And one of them dudes, one of them cats, that made themselves quite a bit of money for this 2016 NFL draft after what happened at the combine is Darron Lee. I think beyond question. If you talk about combine winners and those guys that really did themselves the best, I think you look at Darron Lee and he's going to be one of those guys that will really see his draft stock rise as a result of his combine performance. And it's understandable because he tore shit up, and that's just the truth of the matter. So what do we got with Darron Lee? You're talking about a guy 6'1", about 230 to 235 pounds, redshirt sophomore from Ohio State, so a guy with not a lot of experience, but made a name for himself very, very quickly. And I've watched this guy on film now and watched him again and watched him again. And once he did what he did at the combine, I went and revisited one more time just to make sure that I could validate what I saw at the combine with what I saw on film, see if it jived, see if it meshed. And it did. When you look at this guy, what does he bring to the table in terms of strengths? Very, very quick, almost lightning quick. For a guy 230 pounds, he can really, really move very well with great speed. It's not just initial burst. He gets up to top speed quickly, but he doesn't have much in the way of top speed. For a guy that's 230 plus pounds, he moves really, really well. Not to say that he's a fat boy or anything, because he most certainly isn't. If anything, he needs to add some weight and add some strength. But he's a guy that can fly. And he can be that type of guy with his quickness, his speed. He has great lateral agility. He's a sideline-to-sideline player. He's a guy that can make plays all over the place. He can play sideline to sideline, and as I've talked about in reference before with linebackers, going from line of scrimmage to end zone. You could deploy him all over the place as a run defender, in pass coverage. But I think another underrated element of his game, besides the fact that he's really good in coverage, both in zone and man-to-man situations, a guy you can feel very comfortable if you're in your base defense and he sits there and has to defend against a slot wide receiver, or he gets stuck on the running back out of the flat, or he gets stuck on the tight end. You feel pretty good about your chances, actually. He's a guy that's solid in coverage and seems to have a good understanding of his location and his situation and his surroundings in terms of his zone coverage as well. I look at his effectiveness as a blitzer. And I really like the way Urban Meyer and Ohio State's defense utilized Darron Lee. They kind of used him as a Swiss Army knife, jack-of-all-trades guy, somewhat similar to what UCLA did with Miles Jack. And sometimes you felt like you were watching a hybrid big safety as opposed to a guy that was truly a linebacker. And when it comes to Darron Lee, that's what I thought at times too. Watching this hybrid Swiss Army knife type of player, the guy that would do all these things and could be utilized in so many different fashions, That's really appealing, I think, to NFL defensive coordinators. You can get a guy and find a place to play him, and then you can do all types of different things and move him all the way around. And I think what helps in that is his abilities as a blitzer and his effectiveness as a blitzer and as an edge rusher. Now, sure, he's not going to be a guy that wins with a bunch of power rushing off of the edge, but let's face it, when you talk about guys that can get to the edge and break the edge quickly, Darron Lee is one of those guys. With that quickness and that speed, you're damn right he can do it. And he does a really good job of shooting the gaps inside as a blitzer. I really like what he brings to the table as a pass rush specialist, or not a pass rush specialist, I should say, but as a pass rusher, as a blitzer. When you talk about his speed and his quickness, beyond question, he's a guy that can stick at the NFL level and make big contributions on pass defense, whether it be as a pass rusher, whether it be as a guy in coverage. I think he does a pretty good job, too, in terms of his gap discipline and his ability to keep contained. He's not perfect at it, but like I said, in general, he's really good at it. And for a guy that was utilized all over the place, one thing that concerns me about those Swiss Army knife type of guys like a Darron Lee, like a Miles Jack, is that sometimes they become a jack of all trades and they become a master of none. And as a result, what happens with them being a master of none is I start to get concerned about whether or not they have a good feel for an understanding of the position they would be playing at the NFL level. And if they're so eager from their college days to try and always shoot the gap and always try to make the big play and always penetrate the backfield, that they fuck up the integrity of the entire defense, and they fuck up the contain, and they throw the defense into utter chaos. They just totally destroy the team defense. Similar to what you see at the NBA level with somebody that's reaching while the star is teaching. You know, the guy that gambles can really break down the team defense and cause all types of chaos for his team. I think Darron Lee does a good job of maintaining his gap discipline, maintaining his responsibilities in terms of contain. And I think he has a good nose for the football. He's just this guy that seems to be around it a lot. It seems to be able to find it quite a bit. You know, as you can probably tell, I'm espousing a lot of good things about Darron Lee because there is a lot for me to like on film. Now, obviously, there are always going to be areas of growth, areas to improve. There are always going to be questions about his game. You know, he is 6'1", 230 pounds. It doesn't preclude him from playing outside or inside at the NFL level in a 4-3 or a 3-4 inside anyways. But you'd like to see him get bigger. You'd like to see him get stronger. I mean, he's 6'1". He is 6'1". That's plenty tall enough to play linebacker. 232 pounds. You know, he looks kind of skinny. He could use some muscle. You know, me with the Smith & Wesson gun show, I guess I got a lot of room to talk. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm sure he knows that this is a reality, and he knows that he has to improve upon that for the NFL level, especially because you're going to be going up against some grown-ass men that are 300 plus pounds. And they're going to be coming with a fury. They're going to be coming with a vengeance. And he's going to have to take on more blocks than he did at Ohio State. And I have some concerns about his ability to hold up to those blocks, because I'm not sure that he's strong enough to have good anchor ability. He didn't demonstrate a lot of technique in terms of being able to shed blocks, enough strength to be able to shed blocks. And he's a guy that's better off evading blocks than he is actually taking them on and trying to engage the blocker, then disengage the blocker and make the play. And my concern is at times, if the speed doesn't come into play, you can wash him out of the play and make him a non-factor. And I think that's a legitimate concern for a guy like him, which is why many people probably view him as a best fit as an outside, weak side linebacker in a 4-3. You know, I look at his tackling ability too. You know, he's a guy that can get a little reachy at times, doesn't always take the best angles when he's going to tackle. He can have people run through some of his arm tackles. That comes in part with technique, and that comes apart again with the lack of size and strength. These are things that can get better. These are things that you can improve on. So the good thing for Darron Lee is these issues that he has, I think you can improve on all of these things and you can get better on them. And the upside with this guy in terms of his strengths is absolutely tremendous. In terms of an NFL comparison, I'd probably go with one of two guys. Similarities, sure. Thomas Davis is one. When I see Darron Lee, I see quite a bit of Thomas Davis, you know, going back to Davis's days at Georgia. But I really go to Lavonte David of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I think that's a pretty good comparison. You know, Lavonte David was a guy coming out of Nebraska that people felt was going to be an NFL player, and probably a pretty good one, but thought his best fit was only as a cover 2 weak side linebacker in a 4-3, and that's pretty much what he's proven out to be. You look at Darron Lee, quickness and speed are the name of the game. You know, guys that can make plays sideline to sideline, from line of scrimmage to the end zone, line of scrimmage to the goal line. They can be utilized all over the place. Lavonte David can, and was able to coming out of Nebraska. Darron Lee, same things. You know, really good in coverage too, can play zone, can play man-to-man. You feel very comfortable with Darron Lee that he could stay on the field in any passing situation because of his abilities, again, as a coverage guy. You know, he always seems to be around the football too, and that was something to me for Lavonte David coming out of college, is he always seemed to have a nose for the ball, always seemed to be around it, seemed to be in a position to always make plays. Darron Lee shows some of those same capabilities to me. Two guys that are better evading blockers and avoiding blockers than actually engaging them and taking them on and shedding them. Guys that, again, if their speed doesn't win out, sometimes they can be eliminated from the play. Although I think Darron Lee is a little bit better at that than Lavonte David was coming out of Nebraska, to be fair. Questions about scheme fits, you know, with Darron Lee, you look at him and you say ideal fit is a weak side linebacker in a 4-3. Is he really a guy you think you want to play in the middle in a 4-3? Is he a guy that you really want to play in the middle of a 3-4? You know, similar to Lavonte David. But overall, I really like Darron Lee's game. And this is not just falling in love with him. I'm at the combine and not sitting there saying, you know, he's a workout warrior. I'm not about to issue a workout warrior warning, because what I saw at the combine was validation of what I saw on film in a lot of ways. And I always gravitate to the film, because to me, at the end of the day, in the most cases, if you're paying attention, the film don't lie. The film don't lie, dog, and that's just the truth of the matter. Speed and quickness are always going to be his calling cards. So, if he's a guy that suffers a lot of lower body injuries, ankle injuries, foot injuries, knee injuries, hip injuries, is that something you can sap his speed and quickness and take away some of his effectiveness? Perhaps. Perhaps. But, that's what it could have, should have. You could say that with anybody. But in general, quickness, speed, he's got it in great abundance. Athletic ability to spare. Coverage abilities are really, really good. Just because a guy's athletic doesn't make him good in coverage. Darron Lee is good in coverage because he's good in coverage. He just happens to be athletic and good in coverage. As I alluded to a little bit earlier, I think he's underrated in terms of his effectiveness as a blitzer. Like I said, that's part of what I really liked about how the Ohio State Buckeyes utilized Lee on defense. They did Swiss Army knife him. They used him all over the place, but they really utilized that speed and quickness to their advantage in terms of utilizing him as a blitzer, both through the middle and then on the outside. Blitzing out of the slot. I mean, you're trying to protect the quarterback, this 230-pound dude that can absolutely explode and get off quickly with speed to burn. That's a tough guy to block. He can get to the edge in that 5 to 7 yard area like somebody like a Joey Bosa, his college teammate, I don't think can on a consistent basis at the NFL level. The key to me ultimately in terms of his success at the NFL level and his success in terms of just how much money he made himself at the combine and with teams revisiting the film and where he ultimately goes in the NFL draft, it's going to be all about where he fits and what's his schematic fit. Because teams are going to look at him and say 232 pounds. He needs to put on weight. He needs to put on strength. Strength and physicality are not the name of his game, and some teams like to have strength and physicality in the middle of their defense, and they like players that play with strength and physicality. And I say to all that, I say bullshit. I say when you get a guy with this type of package and these type of strengths, you take him, and then the problem is not fitting him into your defense, it's fitting your defense around him. I think he's an impact, potential type of difference-making linebacker at the NFL level, and furthermore, I think he can play in both a 4-3 and a 3-4. I do. I like Darron Lee better coming out of Ohio State than I did Ryan Shazier. And you look at Shazier, he ended up going to the Steelers in the middle of the first round 2014, and he's playing inside in the 3-4. And I think Darron Lee is a better prospect, a better overall football player. Shazier was maybe just a little bit of a better athlete, but not much. But I think Darron Lee was just overall better. So if Shazier can make it inside in a 3-4, I think Darron Lee can most certainly make it inside of a 3-4. Especially, let's say, just throwing this out there, if a team picking like number 11 that played in Chicago happened to take him to play in the inside, and then they paired him in the second round with a big physical type of dude at the other inside linebacking position, like if they got so fortunate, lucky like a Reggie Ragland. I mean, I'm just saying the possibilities elicit boners all over the place. They do. I think this guy is a top-flight talent in this draft. As I talked about before, there are 6 guys that I think if there's justice in this world are the first 6 picks in this draft in some particular shape, form, configuration. It's Laremy Tunsil, it's Carson Wentz, it's DeForest Buckner, it's Ezekiel Elliott, it's Miles Jack, it's Jalen Ramsey. Those 6 guys are in that first class to me. They are the elite of the elite prospects. Darron Lee is a guy that fits somewhere between that 7 to 12 range for me. I'm that high on him. He is my number 2 linebacker in this draft. Whether you're talking about edge rushers or you're talking about guys that play inside in a 3-4 or 4-3, guys that play outside linebacker in a 4-3, Darron Lee is my number 2 guy. And I think this guy has big-time potential. I think his overall draft range is somewhere between probably pick 8 with the Miami Dolphins down to pick 17 at the Atlanta Falcons. A team like Atlanta that values speed in their defense, Dan Quinn does. He'll look at the Darron Lee, think maybe he could flip him inside in that 4-3 and get himself a Bobby Wagner. Very possibly could. Like I said, this guy I think has big-time potential, and when looking at Ohio State prospects, where all the buzz has been on the defensive side of the ball about Joey Bosa, I'm sorry, I just watched the film, and I think Darron Lee is a superior prospect, and if it wasn't for Ezekiel Elliott being there, I would talk the most about Darron Lee as being the best prospect to come off of that very talented Ohio State team into this draft, because this is a really good player, and I'd be surprised if he fell out of the top 13, 14, 15 picks in this year's draft, especially with the injury to Jalen Smith. somebody's going to take this guy, figure out how to use him, hopefully, and get themselves a stud for the next several years to come.